On the morning I thought we were going to the park with our granddaughter, she leaned in, eyes wide with fear, and whispered in my ear, "Grandma, Grandpa, my parents are sending you to a nursing home today." That one sentence changed everything. I sat there frozen, my hands folded neatly in my lap, heart pounding like a drum. I stared straight ahead, trying to breathe normally, while my mind screamed. My 8-year-old granddaughter, Emma, had just told me what my own son and his wife didn't have the decency to say to my face. They were going to send us away. Today. The voices in the next room grew louder. Matthew and Emily were arguing. Again. This time, there was no whispering, no effort to hide it. "We can't keep putting this off," Emily said. Her voice always sounded calm to outsiders, but I had lived long enough to hear what was under it. A cold finality. Today. We're doing it today. Matthew said something back, too low for me to catch. Then Emily again, louder. "They won't fight us. They never do. Olivia's too soft." Software. That one word felt like a slap. My chest tightened. My hands curled into fists. I looked at my husband, who had turned pale. But behind his shock, I saw the same spark I felt. It wasn't fear, it was awakening. We had suspected something like this. But hearing it, hearing them talk about us like burdens, like things to be dealt with, changed everything. And when I think back, I realize the signs were always there. Like the first time Emily corrected me in front of Emma. I had folded her pajamas and placed them in the drawer. Emily walked by, smiled tightly, and said, "You don't need to do that, Olivia. You always use too much detergent when you do the laundry. We lived in the same house. We shared space, meals and chores. But that didn't mean I was respected. I was tolerated. Barely. It didn't even make sense. I was folding, not washing. But that wasn't the point. It wasn't about detergent. It was about control. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say, I appreciate it. She just dismissed me, moved my hands away like I was in the way. Matthew had said nothing. He just sat there, looking at his phone. Or when they brought us that brochure. It had glossy photos and smiling elderly people. "It's not a nursing home," Emily said. "It's a lifestyle community." I forced a smile, tried to joke, but inside I felt the sting. They wanted us gone. They just hadn't said it yet. Then there was the car. Matthew took it in for a routine oil change. When he came back, he said, "We left the keys at our place. I'll bring them next time." He never did. When I asked again, Emily laughed. "Honestly, Olivia, you shouldn't be driving. That's what rideshare apps are for." We weren't even consulted. They decided for us, as if we were no longer capable of choosing how we lived. She had a way of making her orders sound like favors. "Let me take care of that," she'd say while taking things out of my hands. Or, "Let me handle the groceries this time," like I didn't know how to use a list. Thanksgiving, I offered to cook. It's something I loved, a tradition. No, Olivia," Emily said. Her hand on my shoulder felt more like a gate being shut. "We'll order this year. Let's not wear you out." She moved me to the far end of the table, away from the children, said it was quieter over there. It was lonelier, too. Emma tried to come sit with us. Emily pulled her back. "Grandma's just resting." Resting? I wasn't tired. I was being erased, the bedtime stories. I had always read to Emma. One night, I used a different voice for a character, something Emma loved. Emily shook her head. "That's not how we do it now," she said. "We read calmly." It was like every part of me was being chipped away. One smile, one word, one decision at a time. Matthew started drifting too. Less conversation, less eye contact. We lived under the same roof, but the silence grew louder every day. He used to ask my opinion, laugh at my stories. Now, he barely looked up. When I asked him if everything was okay, he said, "We're just so busy, Mom." Life gets in the way. You understand? I said I did. I didn't. They weren't busy. They were done. With us. I remembered the cruise we paid for. They told friends we were too tired to go, that we wanted to rest. We had never even known there was a cruise. Emily said, "It's not personal." It was very personal. That morning, when Emma whispered the truth, it wasn't a surprise. It was confirmation. I stood up. My knees hurt, but I didn't care. That pain reminded me I was alive. I was still here. My husband followed. He didn't speak. We didn't need to. We didn't pack. Didn't leave a note. We walked out the back door. The air was cool. The garden, quiet. I brushed my hand over the rose bush Matthew and I had planted when he was 7. It was still blooming. So were we. As we passed through the gate, I heard Emily say, "They'll be fine. They'll adjust." Number? We wouldn't adjust. Not this time. We would leave. We got into the car. The ride was silent at first. Then my husband reached over and took my hand. "Are you okay?" I looked at him. The man who had stood by me through decades, through weddings, funerals, and now this. "Not yet," I said, "but I will be." Because this wasn't running away. This was taking back what was left of our dignity. I thought of all the money we had given, paid for their wedding, their house deposit, Emma's private school, covered their emergencies without question. They always asked, and we always gave. Not because we had to, because we wanted to, because we thought that was love. But love doesn't discard you. Love doesn't plan your removal over coffee. As we drove away, I felt something return to me. A piece of myself I hadn't felt in years. Resentment. Not anger, not spite. Just the honest realization that we had been used. And they had no idea what we were capable of. We were not broken. We were awakening. And this story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. You don't just wake up one morning and decide to leave your family, even when they've pushed you to the edge. Even when every glance, every word, every silence has chipped away at you for years, it builds slowly. That morning, after we drove away, we didn't talk much. The silence wasn't cold. It was full. Like we were both holding something too big to put into words. But inside me, something was shifting. I wasn't just hurt. I was awake. I kept replaying all the times I should have seen it. All the tiny betrayals I had dismissed as stress or misunderstandings or just the way things are now. But they weren't misunderstandings. They were choices. Like when Emily started reorganizing the kitchen. She didn't ask, she just did it. "This way makes more sense," she said, smiling tightly. "Less clutter." Everything I used daily was suddenly on the top shelf. Dishes I couldn't reach without a stool. Spices I had labeled and sorted over years were dumped into a plastic bin. "Let me help you get used to it," she added, as if I was a guest in my own space. Matthew didn't notice. Or maybe he did and didn't care. That hurt in a different way. I remember the day he called me dramatic because I asked for the car keys back. "It's not safe anymore," he said. "You're forgetting things." Forgetting things? I had misplaced a grocery list once, a single piece of paper, and now I was being treated like a danger to society. That night, I cried in the laundry room, not because of the car, but because it wasn't just about the keys, it was about how easily they took something from me, how they didn't even pretend to ask. The resentment settled in my bones like cold weather, not loud, not violent, just steady. I started noticing everything, like how Emily never looked me in the eyes when I spoke. She'd nod, glance at her phone, change the subject. If I shared a memory, she'd say, "That was a long time ago," and move on. Or how they always made decisions without us. A new security system we didn't ask for. A guest room converted into an office without discussion. "We thought it was best," they'd say. "It just makes sense." It always made sense. For them. Then there were the finances. We had helped them for years. When Matthew lost his job, we covered their mortgage. When Emma needed braces, we paid the dentist directly. We never asked for anything in return. And yet, when I once suggested we might downsize and use some money for ourselves, maybe a small RV to travel, Emily laughed. At your age? At our age. As if we were already expired. As if dreaming beyond dinner and early bedtime was no longer allowed. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, the assumption that our dreams no longer mattered. And then there was Emma, sweet, observant Emma. She'd crawl into bed with us on Saturday mornings and ask questions. Why does Mommy tell you what to do all the time? I never knew how to answer that. She saw what they couldn't hide anymore. She saw the sighs when I entered the room, the way Emily translated everything I said, as if Emma couldn't understand me, the way Matthew left the room whenever I tried to start a real conversation. We were being phased out. Even the photos on the wall changed. Once our pictures were everywhere, wedding, birthdays, family trips. Slowly they disappeared, replaced by new frames of just the three of them. Our lives edited out, frame by frame. I found a few of the old ones in a drawer, face down, no explanation. That night, I sat on the porch and looked at the stars, remembering the first house we bought, how we painted the nursery together, how Matthew used to ride on his father's shoulders, his laughter, his little shoes by the door. I remembered all of it. They remembered what was convenient. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It was steady, like a slow leak you don't notice until the floor is warped and the damage is already done. And we allowed it. Because we wanted peace. Because we wanted to be close to our son. Because we told ourselves it was just a phase. But now I saw it for what it was. A pattern. A choice. We were tolerated as long as we were useful. As long as we paid, babysat, and stayed silent. The moment we became inconvenient, they made a plan. And they would have followed through. If not for Emma, her whisper didn't just warn us. It woke us up. We spent that first night away in a small roadside inn. Nothing fancy, just clean and quiet. We lay in bed side by side, staring at the ceiling. "Do you think they'll even notice?" I asked. My husband turned to me. Not right away. I believed him. I felt no guilt, only grief, for the years we had poured into them, for the kindness that was mistaken for weakness, for the silence that was interpreted as surrender. But silence can be a decision, and ours had ended. We didn't know exactly what we would do next, but we knew one thing for certain. We would never go back. They wanted to move us out quietly, without conflict, without fuss. We would give them exactly that, but on our terms, because we weren't leaving in defeat. We were leaving to remember who we were, and in time, they would remember too. Not with fondness, with regret. I sat by the window at the inn the next morning, watching the sun rise over the parking lot. Not exactly a grand view, but it felt different. Free. My husband brought me a cup of tea and sat down. "You thinking about going back?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. "I'm thinking about everything we gave up to live under that roof." He nodded. "I keep wondering if they'll pretend to care or just move on." "Maybe both," I said. "Maybe they'll convince themselves they did us a favor." He sipped his coffee. They convinced themselves of worse. We sat for a while saying nothing, just breathing. That morning, we made a list, not of what we left behind, but of what we still had. Hope, time, love, each other, and a desire to reclaim what they had slowly stolen. Our self-respect. We were going to take it back. One quiet, careful step at a time. Because this was only the beginning. You learn a lot when you stop waiting for people to explain themselves. It was the third morning after we left. I stood by the small motel sink, brushing my hair with slow, deliberate strokes. The sun lit the curtains with a soft yellow glow. My husband was still asleep, one arm flung across the empty side of the bed. He looked peaceful, more peaceful than I'd seen him in years. I turned back to the mirror and studied my face. There were more lines now, but behind them, something sharper had returned, something clear. I didn't just feel hurt anymore. I wanted answers. Not the kind they would offer in a carefully rehearsed apology. not the shallow regrets people give when they're caught. I wanted the truth, the real reason they thought they could erase us. So I started digging. It began with a simple idea. What if this wasn't just neglect? What if this was planned? That afternoon, we drove 2 towns over and found a library with computers. I logged into our shared bank account first, at least the one they knew about. There it was, a charge for a deposit at Maple View Living Estates, a nursing home, 2 weeks ago. My throat tightened, but I kept scrolling. Scheduled moving service, home care consultations, even a legal retainer. They had hired an elder care attorney. The pieces clicked into place one by one. They weren't going to just suggest we leave. They were going to make us leave. Quietly. Officially. Legally. I printed everything. Every receipt. Every consultation booking. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but I needed proof. For myself. The betrayal went deeper than I thought. I opened Emily's public posts on her social media. I rarely looked at them, but this time I read every caption like it was evidence. 2 weeks ago, so excited for this next chapter, simplifying life and focusing on what really matters. A photo of Emma, just Emma. The background, our garden. The bench I painted last summer. Focusing on what really matters, as if we weren't even part of that. I scrolled further, found a post from Matthew's business profile. Proud to share our new podcast on managing generational wealth and family dynamics. Wealth, family dynamics. I clicked the link. The episode was called Knowing When to Let Go. My hand trembled. He was talking about us, about his own parents, without saying our names. He used phrases like emotional clutter and respecting the independence of adult children. I listened to the whole thing. By the end, my face felt hot. They weren't just moving on, they were rewriting the story, making themselves the heroes of it. That evening, I sat outside on the motel balcony, watching the sky change colors. I couldn't look away from the shifting light. I felt a kind of sadness I hadn't let myself feel in a long time, the kind that settles into your chest and doesn't go away. "You okay?" my husband asked, pulling up a chair beside me. I showed him the documents, the receipts, the podcast. He read them quietly. His expression didn't change, but I saw his hands clench the paper tighter. "So it wasn't just about us being old," he said. Number it was about getting rid of us, without guilt, without looking bad. We sat in silence. I finally said it. I don't think they ever saw us as people, just obstacles. He nodded slowly, or maybe they loved us once, but that kind of love ran out the moment we weren't useful anymore. And then, as if a thread had snapped inside me, I remembered something I had buried long ago, a moment I never shared. I was 16 when my father told me I wasn't worth keeping. It was a quiet evening. No yelling, just a suitcase at the door. He didn't want to feed another mouth, he said. "You'll understand when you're older." And now, almost 60 years later, my own son was doing the same. History, repeating in silence. Only this time, I was not that 16-year-old girl. I had raised a child, loved him, forgiven his mistakes, and paid for his peace. And still, they asked me to leave. Still, they set the date behind my back. Still, they made plans over my quiet compliance. That twist of memory broke something open. What I had seen as hurt was now unmistakable. It was betrayal. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to them, to myself. I wrote out every time I felt erased, silenced, replaced, every time Emily interrupted me mid-sentence, every time Matthew looked through me, every time I handed over money with a smile and got silence in return. I wrote until my hand ached. Then I folded the paper and tucked it into my purse. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was freedom. But freedom would require clarity and a plan. We had another account, a private one they didn't know about. I'd set it up years ago, just in case. And now, that instinct had become our safety net. We called our lawyer, explained everything, asked what we could do, what our rights were. He listened patiently. Then he asked, "Do you have proof they were trying to force a legal move?" I emailed him the receipts. He called back 10 minutes later. "You need to act fast, before they file anything official." The next day, we transferred the house title to the trust, not their trust, our granddaughter's, with strict conditions. She wouldn't get access until she turned 30, and only if she met a clear list of requirements: education, community service, a board review. It wasn't about money, it was about protection, about putting our values somewhere they couldn't reach. We also revoked the financial power of attorney Matthew had been quietly using. He wouldn't know it until he tried to use it again. Piece by piece, we were taking our lives back. We weren't doing it with shouting. We were doing it with paper, with plans, with silence. And for the first time in years, I felt powerful. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about reclaiming. The part that shocked me most was how easy it was for them, how seamless, all the things we had done for them, the loans, the childcare, the holidays, the repairs, all the small kindnesses they never noticed. Gone. Not even acknowledged. I remembered when Emily broke her wrist and I helped her bathe because she was embarrassed. I remembered how I held Emma all night when she had her first fever, just so they could sleep. None of it mattered now. I was a checklist to them. Minimize risk, consolidate assets, simplify living space. The way you might talk about reorganizing an office, but I wasn't an office. I was their mother. And now they would understand what it meant to be removed from someone's life, not out of malice, out of necessity, out of survival. I didn't want an apology anymore. I wanted distance and the right to decide what came next on my terms, because if they could plan my removal, I could plan my return, not to their lives, but to my own. And that was a plan I could finally believe in. I don't know exactly where this ends. Maybe we'll buy a little cabin and build a new rhythm. Maybe we'll visit towns we've only seen on postcards. Maybe we'll plant a garden somewhere no one can touch. What I do know is this: we are no longer waiting to be wanted. We are done being useful at the cost of being respected. And in this silence we've chosen, we're hearing ourselves again, clearly, strongly, finally. They didn't notice we were gone. Not at first. It took them 3 full days. 3 days of silence before I got the first text message from Emily. "Hey, just checking in. Everything okay? Emma's been asking." That's how it started. Polite concern layered over panic. I didn't answer, because I remembered the way she had folded my sweater like it was in the way, the way she had spoken in half-hushed tones across the hallway to Matthew, thinking we were too old to notice or understand. It's for the best. They'll adjust. Those were her exact words, words spoken with the same cold logic you'd use when donating old furniture. Like we were no longer useful, just taking up space. They echoed now, louder than her message. I deleted it. That was the beginning of my new routine, ignoring the people who ignored our humanity. We were at the Montana property by then, secluded, safe, ours. It felt good to be somewhere that didn't have their fingerprints on every surface. We spent the first few days organizing, not just the physical space, but our documents too. I created a folder titled Legacy. I meant every letter of that word. Inside, it went: the new will, the trust for Emma, the revoked power of attorney forms, the letter we'd written for our lawyer detailing the timeline of their plan. Each file felt like a piece of my voice coming back. I wasn't shouting, but I was making myself heard. The next message came from Matthew. "Hey, we just noticed the house is empty. We're worried. Let us know if you're safe." Safe. It was ironic. They hadn't cared about our safety when they discussed the cheapest long-term care options. When I heard Matthew say, "It'll save everyone stress in the long run," my stomach had turned. Stress. That was the word he used to describe his parents living in the same home. I stared at his message for a long time. Then I archived it. The resentment didn't flare hot anymore. It simmered, low and steady, a slow burning awareness of what we meant to them now, an inconvenience. I remembered every glance that had skimmed past me, every invitation that had turned into an obligation, every birthday that had been too hard to organize this year. My memory sharpened like glass under pressure. There was the time Emily rolled her eyes when I asked about dinner plans, as if I was interrupting something vital. "We're just trying to stick to our routine, Mom. It's easier that way." Easier. I had made things easier for them for years. Cooking, cleaning, babysitting, loaning money, pretending not to hear when they fought. I made it easy. And now that we didn't fit into their plans, they expected us to fade quietly. But we didn't fade. We evolved. I made appointments. Not with doctors, but with accountants, lawyers, realtors. We were restructuring our entire estate. For years, we had quietly funneled gifts their way. A car down payment here, a semester of college tuition there, covering the plumbing emergency, buying Emma's piano. Now, the flow reversed. We protected everything. Even our medical directives were updated, removing their names. I didn't want someone making choices for me who once said, "They won't remember much longer anyway." Emily said that during a dinner party. She was half laughing. Everyone else laughed too, except me. I had remembered. Every word. Now it was my turn to speak, but I would speak through action. The next letter we sent was formal. It came from our lawyer, sent directly to Matthew and Emily. It stated plainly, "You no longer have authority over our affairs. All legal and financial matters are under review. Please direct further communication through our attorney." The reaction came fast and loud. Matthew called our lawyer's office 4 times in one day, left messages, demanded an explanation, demanded access, even tried to cancel our property insurance. Emily sent a barrage of emails. "What is this? You're cutting us out? After everything we've done for you? This is cruel, unbelievable." Her tone changed with each new email, first confused, then offended, then indignant. Her final message read, "This is the thanks we get? After years of care and support, you'll regret this." Matthew sent a text laced with sarcasm. "Glad to know money means more to you than family." As if we hadn't given up retirement vacations, delayed repairs, even sold assets just to help them during hard times. They weren't heartbroken. They were furious because we had changed the script. They had planned the ending. We rewrote it. They tried damage control. Emily called mutual friends, told them we were acting out of character, that we might be confused. Matthew tried to contact our former doctor, hoping to get some medical concern filed. Our lawyer intercepted everything. Then Emily posted on social media, vague but sharp. "It's hard when the people who raised you turn out to be strangers. We tried everything." The comments poured in, sympathetic, outraged, people we barely knew voicing opinions based on half-truths. Matthew messaged our lawyer again. "We're pursuing a wellness check. They may not be mentally sound." That hit me in the chest, not because I believed it, but because of what it revealed. They had no shame left, only strategy. But we were ready. We had video footage of ourselves, recorded that week, looking healthy, composed, clear-minded. We documented it with timestamps. We weren't paranoid. We were precise. We even updated our estate letter. This one was addressed to Emma. "You were the one who whispered truth when the room was full of lies. We heard you. We see you. You will never be punished for your honesty." It was our promise to her. In that moment, I didn't feel like a grandmother or a forgotten parent. I felt like a woman who had just planted something important in soil untouched by selfishness. We made a list of things we wanted to do: horseback riding, stargazing, writing a memoir, not because they were bucket list items, because we had time, real, unclaimed time. We sent a final notice. All communication going forward will be reviewed by our estate advisor. We wish you peace. We ask for space. No cruelty, just a boundary. Then came the unexpected part. Emily's cousin called, someone who never took sides. He said, "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." They're spiraling. Maybe they need to. It hit me. We weren't the ones unraveling. They were. I didn't slam a door on them. I simply closed it, quietly, and turned the lock from my side. We were not victims of neglect. We were architects of our own escape. That escape led us not into isolation, but into peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you saw through the smiles, the performances, the excuses, and chose yourself anyway. That peace? It's quiet, but it's everything. It's the sound of not explaining anymore. It's the comfort of your own company. It's the strength of remembering, without bitterness, what you deserve. We were not erased. We were reborn. And then something happened I'll never forget. A letter arrived, not from Emily or Matthew, but from Emma. The envelope was pink. Not a bright, childish pink, but the soft kind. The kind little girls pick out when they're trying to act grown up. My hands trembled slightly as I turned it over. In the corner, in careful cursive, was her name. Emma. Not Emily, not Matthew, but Emma. That alone told me everything I needed to know about what was inside. I sat down in the chair by the window, the one with the view of the pines, and peeled it open slowly, careful not to tear the paper. My husband watched me from the table, his book half closed in his lap. Inside was a letter, not typed, handwritten. "Dear Grandma and Grandpa, I miss you. Mom and Dad say you went away to rest because you're tired, but I know they're not telling the truth. I heard them talking again. They said you were being dramatic, that you were acting selfish, but I don't think that's true. You were never selfish with me. You made me pancakes in silly shapes. You helped me with my school projects when Mom said she was too busy. You listened to me, really listened. I found your picture on my bookshelf, and I cried. Please don't be mad at me for telling you what I heard that day. I just wanted to help. Love, Emma." By the time I finished reading, my cheeks were wet. I held the letter to my chest for a long time. The words weren't long. They weren't dramatic. But they held more honesty than anything we'd heard from our children in years. My husband stood quietly and brought me a glass of water. He sat beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to, because we both knew the truth. Emma saw us. Still, and in a world that had tried so hard to make us invisible, that meant everything. Later that afternoon, we wrote back, carefully, with love. We didn't mention the estate. We didn't talk about betrayal. We just told her how much we loved her, how proud we were, and how she had more courage than some adults ever learned to have. It wasn't revenge. It was legacy. Our lawyer sent the letter through a secure courier, not the mail. We wanted to be sure it got to her hands directly. 2 weeks passed before we got a reply. This one had a photo. Emma, in her school uniform, holding our letter. Her eyes sparkled, not with confusion, but with understanding. It was enough. That same week, the final version of our estate plan was executed. The house, the business earnings, the retirement accounts, the art collection, everything was locked into the trust. Not for Emily, not for Matthew, for Emma, but with a clause. She could access the funds only when she turned 30, and only if she passed a character review led by 3 people of our choosing, individuals who understood what empathy, responsibility, and integrity looked like. They would judge her not by grades, not by accomplishments, but by how she treated people who couldn't give her anything. It was our last lesson, quiet, but lasting. Emily found out first. She called, screaming into the phone so loudly that the voicemail transcript couldn't even capture all her words. "How dare you? After all we did, she's a child. You're punishing us through her." Matthew left another voice message, this one slower, more measured, but no less venomous. I can't believe you're letting your bitterness destroy the family. You're pitting your granddaughter against us. That's cruel. That's manipulative. Manipulative. The word rang in my head like a bell. How many times had they rearranged our kindness into obligations? How often did they twist guilt into currency? Now that the money wasn't flowing their way, now that they weren't in control, it was suddenly called manipulation. They hadn't spoken to us in terms of love or family in years, only transactions. Who's coming over when? Who's paying for what? Who's taking care of Emma when they wanted a vacation? We'd become a resource, not relatives. And now, cut off, they were scrambling. They tried one last tactic. Matthew sent a message through an old family friend. They said they're sorry. They didn't mean for it to go this far. They were scared. They thought you needed help. Scared. That was the word they used when they wanted to save face. But what they feared most wasn't our health or our well-being. It was the loss of control. I sent no reply. That night, I lit a candle. Not for them, for me, to mark the end of a chapter, and to remind myself that silence is sometimes the loudest answer. The following weeks were peaceful. We went hiking. We spent evenings watching the stars. We laughed, often, not because everything was perfect, but because we were free. One morning, my husband asked if I ever missed them. Sometimes, I said, but I miss who I thought they were, not who they became. That difference mattered. It gave me permission to let go, not forget, just stop chasing apologies that would never come. Months passed. We subscribed to a print magazine, a small one focused on stories from older adults rebuilding their lives. One day, they ran a call for submissions. I wrote our story, changed names, shared the truth. They published it. The headline read, "How We Reclaimed Our Dignity After Being Treated Like We Didn't Matter." I read it out loud to my husband the morning it came in the mail. He smiled, and I knew deep in my bones that we had done the right thing. Not the easy thing, but the right one. I don't expect Emily and Matthew to understand. Maybe one day they will. Maybe they won't. That's not mine to carry anymore. What I carry now is peace. What I hold now is pride. And when I look in the mirror, I don't see a victim. I see a survivor who refused to be silenced. I see a woman who remembered her worth. If you've ever felt like you don't belong, like your love was used and discarded, then hear this. You are not alone. And your dignity doesn't expire with age. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Just walk away and begin again.